Welcome to Australian Gothic, a podcast on Australiana and the darkness that lurks beneath. We're your hosts, Josie Spicer and Lucas.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you so much to everyone who listened to the first episode. You all had a lot of really nice things to say. That's so nice.
Yeah, I had fun making it. I thought I expected maybe a few of my friends to listen, but actually overwhelmingly good response. I'm excited. I hope we can educate you all more. I know that we have a few Americans listening already, so we're also getting the international audience, which is kind of at least half the motivation behind this is explaining Australia to foreigners, trying to ward them away from here. This is episode 2, Byron Bay. Today, we'll be taking the listeners on a little flyover of the area and phenomenon, I guess, known as Byron Bay. But before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that today we're coming together to record and share knowledge on unceded Yagara and Turrbal land. Sovereignty was never ceded here, nor was it anywhere in the colony that we call Australia. Now, a disclaimer, I've never been to Byron Bay. You have, Lucas. But I'm going to do whatever this version, I guess, Australia-splaining to you. And, despite it only being a 2-hour drive south of where we live, never been. And this is partly because of some of the things that I'll get into. So here's how I'm going to break down this episode. First of all, I'm going to give you a brief history of the area. Then I'll be using a piece from Vanity Fair as a launching point into some of the elements that I find particularly distasteful about Byron Bay. I'll throw it to you. Obviously, Lucas, you're welcome to come in at any point. I know that you have your own sort of anecdotes. I'll ask you what your experiences are of the area. And I've also got a few experiences to read out. Some tellings, some anecdotes from friends of the show. Before wrapping up, I'll then sort of just briefly touch on, I guess, my final thoughts relating to colonization and identity and cosplaying working class, but in a really weird way.
I have kind of a word for this. It's something you see in wealthy people. I feel like this is tapping up against what you're talking about. Culture capital.
Yeah.
You're trying to appear more worldly than you are, and being able to buy that, whether that's by buying access to a certain location or a certain culture. Is that possibly at all where you're headed?
That is, I feel like it kind of encompasses a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. So I guess I'll actually give my main thesis statement first. Byron Bay ultimately, I think, is this microcosm of everything that I find distasteful about colonization. It's like this very infuriating mixture of colonization, gentrification, and capitalism and commodification of spirituality and a lot of quote-unquote authentic sort of experiences. And finally, just to sort of bring some lightheartedness to the episode, I just want to take you through some of the events and services that I found while just entering Byron Bay into Google. And all of my sources I'll send to you to put in the show notes and people can access it. Byron Bay is a beachside town on the east coast of Australia and will be largely what we're talking about today, but for the pedants out there, we might flick between talking about the town itself and the general Byron area. Byron Bay is adjacent to Cape Byron, which is the easternmost point of mainland Australia, and as of 2016 had a permanent population of around 9,200 people, but it's visited by around 2 million tourists per year. So huge tourist destination. If you Google image search it, beautiful, beautiful location. You might have heard of it. There is a certain Avenger who lives there with his wife. And also Pete Evans lives in that area too. He's a little bit further north, but he made an appearance at Blues Fest just this previous weekend. Pete Evans, I'll get into, his first appearance since the fucking Sonnenrad gate.
Is that when he posted the thing on Twitter of the Black Sun?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what the name you just said. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I'm glad you don't know the name of it. It's fine. So
I'm pure still.
I'll get into Pete Evans later, so sorry to folks we've already lost. Please bear with me. So around 2 million tourists per year. It's also a popular tourist destination for its general vibe and culture, and there's always something to do there in terms of like there's lots of retreats and alternative medicine workshops happening there. There's lots of cooking workshops. It's really much an alternative wellness / spirituality hub. There's a prevalent presence of new age shops, spiritual services, and wellness retreats. Byron Bay is, of course, the colonizer name for the area known as Cavern Bar, or meeting place. It's known as Cavern Bar by the traditional custodians of the land, the Bundjalung nation of the Arakwal, Minjungbul, and Widjabul people. Sorry, I was trying to say that correctly. And the Bundjalung nation have been on that land for at least 22,000 years. So what we're talking about is a very recent phenomenon, but people have been living there for a very, very long time. So since colonization, the area has been used for logging, gold mining, cattle and dairy farming. In 1901, the Cape Byron Lighthouse was built, and if you look on Instagram, you'll probably see hundreds of photos of this lighthouse. And it is positioned on the most easterly point of the mainland of Australia, but destroyed a significant Arakwal men's ceremonial ground in the process. So it's good to now look at that and know that they knowingly destroyed, a sacred ceremonial ground to build the lighthouse. Just as I kind of like got a bit into a rabbit hole reading about the Arakwal peoples and like their beliefs and stuff, and it seems like what we call Byron Bay, it seems like it was, it's Cavern Bar, meeting place. Often a lot of different peoples would meet there, share knowledge, trade. It was a really important area, and there's quite a few landmarks around that seem to be quite sacred. Just as like a little note, like the bottlenose dolphins, that's the totem for Arakwal women, and the cabal or carpet snake is like the totem for the Arakwal people in general. Anyway, I just thought that was very cool to know, and I just found pre-colonial history, like, it's so fucking hard to find, easily access this information. So I was like, I felt like I should pass it on at least. Even though the area is visually stunning even now, the environment was damaged through sand mining between the two world wars. And the place was apparently very stinky for like a good 30 years or so, because there were annual whale slaughters, and I guess they just like let some of the carcasses and shit just chill out. And also because there was like a large presence of meat and dairy works in the area, so it was kind of this beautiful but very smelly area up until the 1960s.
I find it very funny that Byron Bay was like this big surfing town, and there was this like huge surfing culture there to this day. And for the longest time, like when it was a town where they do like whaling, apparently the waters were shark infested because they would just chuck all the whale offal out into the bay and sharks would just go apeshit.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So that's actually really interesting. So I wonder if so from my understanding, the whaling kind of stopped in about 1963, and it was around that time that the longboard surfers arrived. It must be because there's no fucking sharks there anymore, because you're not just like baiting them, basically. Also, before I continue, Byron Bay, it's not actually a bay, it's a bight. So it's like this really long, shallow, kind of inward sloping thing. So for the geology heads out there, or fucking whatever, topography heads, there you go.
I did have that. Sorry, I tried to jump in again. I did have that for a minute because I was just like, oh, I live near sort of Moreton Bay, and it's a bay because there's like a bunch of islands.
Yeah.
Around Brisbane. Harvey Bay, I've gone to Fraser Island a lot. Again, it's like an area that's sheltered by an island. I was just like, why is it called Byron Bay? There's no like big island sort of like sheltering it. So, all right, thank you. I'm glad that I'm really speaking to one person, but I was so excited by that little piece of information, and I'm glad you found it exciting too, because I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And also, I think bites are cool. Byron Bite, that sounds cool. Oh, I thought you said Byron Butt.
Byron Butt.
Can we call it Byron Butt?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's probably what it was called when it was stinky. Fucking doo-doo-ass bay. Well, now I know that, like, the waters were shark-infested because of the whaling. This makes sense that in the 1960s, that's when longboard surfers arrived. And so began the era of Byron Bay as a tourist destination. But it was a tourist destination for cash-poor people. So still lots of working class people coming to visit. I did speak to my mum earlier today, and she had memories from around this period in the 60s and 70s when she would visit. And she said that her and her first husband would come down because in New South Wales, slot machines and pokies, like they weren't in Queensland until 1992. So people would come down to New South Wales to gamble, and this was like, that would be one of the reasons that at least they in particular came to Byron Bay. So I just found that interesting, and that was kind of not mentioned at all in the literature that I read.
As someone who finds like pokies and TAB, sports bet bars and shit like that super boring, that sounds depressing as shit. Like, so you're traveling like 2 hours to come to Byron, come to New South Wales just so you can like play pokies. Like, man, sorry, if you don't live in Australia, like, I mean, I suppose you've seen like a place that has slot machines or, you know, poker machines. They suck so hard. In
the US, it's still very, like, it's only on certain like reservations and in like Nevada and New Jersey, right? Like, it's quite contained, and you still have to visit to go to those like casinos and shit, right?
Oh, okay. So like, so the American, sorry, we're butting up against other topics. Yeah. So the idea of like going to a pub and there's a section that smells like shit where there's a lot of horrible, sad-looking, Dark Souls-looking motherfuckers playing slot machines. That's not a thing in most American cities?
No, I don't think that is it?
If you're listening to this show, like, does your local pub have a section that sucks shit with like a bunch of like horribly racist slot machines? Please let us know.
I'm pretty sure they're not allowed, but I could be wrong. Because this would, okay, here we go, fucking forming our own bingo card as we go.
Tangents.
But like, I think gambling in Australia is something that is very, unfortunately close to me, and something I feel quite passionately about. Australia gambling culture is fucking cooked. Like, our access to gambling facilities is just off the charts compared to other countries, including the US. Yeah, from the 60s to the 80s, that's sort of when this tourist destination for surfers and a lot of working class people, a lot of like cash poor hippies. So my mum was like, said to me, she said, Josie, like, they were actually like the stinky hippies.
Okay.
And like, with no judgment, just like, no, like, genuinely like traveled and committed to the bit, as it were.
Okay, so not necessarily like, oh, we want to build a commune and grow our own fruit and vegetables. Not like the hot hippies from a movie like Easy Rider. They were just like kind of like trying to make a go of it as best as possible. Still like some of the roughness that comes along with that due to just like the difficulties of that lifestyle.
Oh, they still wanted to make the communes, but they all would just have like stank ass while they're doing it. So like all of that, but they did still have those ideals of like wanting to have a commune, because like especially around like the 60s and 70s, it's like a huge time for a lot of counterculture thinking anyway. Yeah, a lot of this commune and alternative lifestyle stuff did form around this era, but the people doing it weren't cashed up, if that kind of makes sense.
Okay, and I had this notion that, like with a lot of modern Australia, like World War II happens, everyone comes back, moves to the suburbs, becomes the middle class. Certainly in a lot of Brisbane, I feel this is partially the case. Like, you know, they get kind of wealthy, you know, or at least comfortable, and a way a lot of these beach towns, particularly the Sunshine Coast, the Gold Coast, crop up is that they were just like, hey, the land up there is cheap, let's buy a house. Oh, look, I own a beach house. It's now worth like $3 million. So I kind of assumed Byron was a little bit like that, but then I had trouble reconciling the hippie part of it.
Yeah, so what you're talking about, I think that certainly happened, and it happened, I'm sure it was happening all along, but it certainly happened with gusto from the 1980s. The 1980s sort of gave way to like this era of cash-rich consumers and developers coming in, and like this is probably where people are finding out that like their houses are worth like a fuck ton more. And like this is when gentrification really sets in. And up until this day, it's a popular spot for cashed up hippies to move and live out their best influencer lives. And this brings me to mentioning this a Vanity Fair article titled The Coast of Utopia. It was published in July of 2019. A link to it will be in the show notes.
Just so our viewers are aware, I will be reacting to this. I have read this article before, but I blacked so much of it out because I just kept like screaming and shrieking. I was like working from home, like making coffee, listening to it being read to me, and just like having to pause it and like scream into my empty house.
And look, I'm gonna be merciful, and I'm not gonna read too much out because it is a very good article and it covers most of what I'm fucking talking about here. The reason I remember this article is this person, the writer for this piece, went to Byron Bay and kind of interviewed someone named Courtney Adamo and whoever the fuck she is when she's home, and a whole bunch of other like Instagram influencers based in Byron Bay. The thing I remember from this piece, and it is okay, sorry, I just have to find my words. Okay, I'm just going to read it out to you.
Before you start reading it, do you think I should rattle off my history with Byron Bay, like just so the audience kind of understands where I'm coming from?
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. What's your experience with Byron Bay, Lucas? Because I have none.
Okay, so between about 2006 and 2012, 2013, I went to uni with a few people who lived in Byron. Had a number of friends who lived there. I dated someone who grew up there for about 5 years. So between those years, I spent a decent amount of time in Byron Bay. Like every couple of months, I would go down there for like a few days to a week. The last time I was there was in 2019 with my wife. We were like 5 months out from having our first child. And I think we were there about the time this article was published, actually. And so it was fascinating to go to Byron Bay with my wife sort of as a grown-up and see how it had changed. And when we were there in 2019, like there's always been like a wellness psycho-culture in Byron Bay. But in 2019, seeing all the like anti-5G stuff.
Oh my God, really?
We didn't really see any outward anti-vax stuff, but you kind of were aware of it. Or vaccine skepticism. I certainly wasn't aware of it back from like 2012 to 2013, but that was probably because I was, not super aware of those topics. In 2019, driving into town, we were staying in like Bangalore or something like that,
yes,
and going into the town to do stuff. And you would see so many signs saying like, oh, don't let them build 5G cells around town because they'll make your children gay or some shit like that.
Which, to be fair, is probably desirable for some subsection of people, but they'd want them to be naturally gay. Yeah.
Only naturally gay kids.
Yeah. No artificially gay kids.
Look, at the end of the program, if you're okay with it, I will do a little tourism itinerary if you absolutely have to go to Byron Bay that'll help your sanity, if everyone is okay with that.
I was thinking about this. I'm like, if people want me to, or if I want me to, I could like go down and like, it's only a fucking 2-hour drive away. I could do it just like a day trip or even an overnighter and like wear a mask.
Honestly, it's about an hour and a half now because they like built a bit of motorway or something like that. Anyway,
True.
This is infrastructure chat. So.
Look, I any diverging diamonds on the way and I am sold. Okay, this article, Courtney Adamo, I believe she is from possibly America or the UK, and she moved to Byron Bay, and she's a paid influencer on Instagram, allegedly mid-tier. But the thing I want to read out is just a few sentences in the opening paragraph. It begins by talking about this woman's minimalist shaker-style kitchen and how gorgeous it is. It says, with its clapboard cupboards, wooden stools, bulk dry goods in mason jars, blank marble countertops, her Dunlin Chelsea pendant lights, and then in parentheses says $669 each, Smeg refrigerator, $2,870.
Oh, I have a note about this because, sorry, for viewers who don't know, I used to work in like real estate photography, and Smeg products are like expensive wank.
Oh yeah,
So
such expensive
You
wank.
buy them for the name tag.
And they
like,
have
you buy
pretty
it because
colours.
you want
Yeah.
You buy it because you want a big pink fridge, but like apparently the products themselves like are kind of
Pretty ordinary.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to an extent, a fridge is a fridge. And then basically the author goes on and like lists a few more things in the kitchen, such as the stove, which was the oven and stove, which was $10,000, and says the kitchen is like a scene out of Little House on the Trust Fund Prairie. And I fucking died. Because Little House on the Trust Fund Prairie is like, sums up this entire aesthetic. Byron Bay is currently home to these people who are influencers, are being bankrolled either through a trust fund or through sponsored posts or through a partner who has a undisclosed job, probably in an extractive industry. But they spend so much money to try and look poor.
Oh, yeah.
Their kids are wearing paupers' clothes, but those paupers' clothes are made out of beautiful flax linen, naturally dyed, you know, shit that you might see in the fucking Polish ghetto, you know, in the fucking early 40s, 30s and 40s. But this is chic.
Yep.
Sorry, I get real petty real fast about this shit. Like, especially someone who grew up quite poor. Seeing people put so much time and money into, like, living simply, I'm like, mate, that's not how it works. Anyway, there is this entire movement of people moving to Byron Bay to be living this quote-unquote slow life or slow living, and they kind of address it in that Vanity Fair article and about how that doesn't really reflect reality and whatnot. And there's definitely truth to that, but you have to spend so much money to even put up the visage, like the falsehood of living slowly. Also, some listeners might be wondering if I'm going to address it. There is a relatively new show on Australian Netflix called Byron Bays. I'm trying to avoid watching it until after this episode to see, like, confirm or deny my suspicions of like how things are for these, like, what I imagine are fairly well-off influences in Byron Bay. It takes an awful amount of privilege, both financial and white, to be able to live the ideal Byron life. Byron Bay does attract a lot of sort of alternative living, and a lot of this has ended up being paying out the arse and nose for yoga retreats, for sound therapy, for fucking, let me see, what do we got here? I wrote some lists down. Some sound bowl meditation, some breath work, all this stuff. And especially seeing how much was sacred about the area of Cabin Bar or Byron Bay, and then seeing kind of like, then it was colonized. And now those who were colonizing it are now colonizing Eastern religious and spiritual practices on colonized land.
Sorry, I was going to jump in because, yeah, like there is so much, like, you know, you can buy Tibetan flags, you can buy those Om Mani Padme Om, like wheels that you spin.
Yeah.
A friend of mine got married in Byron. We stayed in a room that was full of like Balinese, like, you know, soft timber furnishings and stuff. So it's fascinating that, yeah, it's on colonized Barjalung land, and they're just like, oh, we're also appropriating a lot of, we're doing the whole like, oh, we're beautiful souls, we're Buddhists, like that sort of thing.
And so I was thinking about this a lot. This has been actually really interesting for me, because like usually so for my other podcast, A Hill to Die On, usually I'm trying to find, was I right or was I wrong? Like, what's the definitive answer here? But this is more just sort of like contemplating a lot of shit, and there's no right or wrong answer, and I have a lot of conflicting thoughts. But I was thinking, I have a few thoughts and I don't really know where they go, and I just sort of bounce them off you. But on one hand, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I haven't been to Byron Bay, but I've been to Lennox Head, which is like a little bit south maybe, or maybe a little bit north. And it's sort of one of the places that's still working class, but is becoming gentrified, and I think will become a mini Byron Bay in a few years. And I remember looking out into the ocean, and like, it is the water there, like the nature there is so amazing and you feel so small, and I can see why people might go there and feel like they want to be more connected to the land, or like, you know, they want to serve some sort of power bigger than them, whether it's community or gods or whatever. So I understand that. And then, so I'm wondering how much of that factors into it, just the sort of environment itself. But also I'm thinking about white people in Australia. Huge lack of belonging in terms of like, I mean, I understand like how amusing it is having a, you know, quote unquote Australian culture podcast and then saying there's no culture, but it's all very loose. Like it's not old. It's not old and it's not sacred. And I understand like feeling lost and wanting to seek belonging. And so I think Byron Bay gets a lot of seekers. And I also don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with practicing Eastern spirituality. I think there's something wrong with paying white people to, you know, learn whether cultural or religious practices. Sorry, I know I'm ranting a bit, but it's like I have these conflicting thoughts about it, because I'm like, on one hand, I understand the impulse of this seeking, and for a lack of a better term, I understand the woo-woo. Like I understand the desire for woo-woo. I think it's the commodification of it that is really distasteful for me, because it's like a layer of at least falseness to it. I don't know. You
get the sense that some of the people practicing it or some of the people fixated on it are either trying to cover for something or conceal something. And you really hit the nail on the head there before when you were talking about how in Australia we are, you know, quite culturally a young, you know, sort of the colony at least is quite a young thing. And a lot of the imagery we have fucking sucks. That was one of the reasons I reached out to you to start this podcast, because if you look at facets of Australian culture, we'll get to Australian Christmas carols at one point. I'm adding it to what I'm calling the heap, where they, you know, take Christmas carols and make them Australian through lyrics. And I remember like listening to them as a kid and being like, this fucking sucks. This is so bleak.
It does. It does
it's two
suck.
Cunts in a ute. Esky in the ute. Got my dog. Gosh. I'm gonna get shit-faced in the wilderness and do Wake and Fright.
Yep.
Next episode, sorry. Wake and Fright. In some ways, so you've made me come around. It's just like, ha ha ha, look at these like fake hippies. And it's just like, God, yeah, if you look at the idea that like Australia is just like two fuckwits and wife beaters getting shit-faced in the bush, you would be like, no, this fucking sucks. This isn't me. Is there something better?
And so I kind of understand that. And, you know, I'd be lying if I said that I hadn't thought about that. Not Byron Bay for my next point, which I'll get to in a moment, which is the fucking depressing rate of vaccination in Byron Shire. Again, I find Byron Bay to be this interesting space of like a whole bunch of white people wanting to find belonging, which is understandable, but doing it by appropriating other cultures on land that is stolen and not ever fucking interrogating that. And also like grifters charging an arm and leg to provide wellness
birthing
services. Yeah, absolutely. Something I did find was I went onto Eventbrite. I just searched for things coming up in Byron Bay. I clicked on every single entry on like the first 4 pages, and I looked through them and I just like made some observations, and there was a fucking lot of woo-woo. Mm-hmm. But I did notice that there were some really cool workshops that even I would go to, and a lot of it was like learning about back burning, which is like I'm sure they have it in areas in the US, but it's like the controlled burning of bushland to make sure that you don't then get like devastating bushfires. And it was like learning how like First Nations peoples did it for fucking millennia or whatever. That was free. There were some things learning about just like basic biodiversity and the importance of biodiversity in the Byron Shire. That was free. There was some like meditation sessions that were free, or like a whole bunch of things that were like you pay what you want. And I thought that is probably like those ones that are free, or like even the little bit of woo-woo ones that are like pay what you want. Maybe I'm making assumptions here, but it seemed like those people genuinely were there to build community, to build like, you know, love for the land. I have less criticism for that than I do for the following.
Okay. Oh, okay. Hit me.
Well, there were a whole fuck ton of like 3 to 7 night wellness retreats that were vague, cost anywhere from $1,800 to $2,500, depending on if you wanted to share a room or if you wanted a double bed.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And it just like had a grab bag of all these different like spiritual practices. But here's one that I really liked. So there's an event coming up called Sound Bowl Meditation and Prompted Journal Circle.
Okay.
I'll just read part of the description because the whole thing, too much even for my poor innocent listeners who don't deserve this. And for you, Lucas, I guess. So this is what happens. I believe it was $25, which to be fair is on the far lower end for a workshop in Byron Bay. Anyway, we begin the session with group breathwork followed by prompted journaling. All journal questions are inspired by the current astrological transits and printed ready for you. You're welcome to bring your journal if you would prefer to free write. Essential oil blends are misted overhead before we make our way down for an immersive 50-minute crystal sound bowl journey. We allow ample time afterwards to connect with each other over oracle cards and ceremonial grade organic cacao, parentheses, vegan. So that was a lot of words there. So
yeah, that's like all the woo words. That's like a checklist.
It was bingo. Just had to fit them in there. But yeah, no, so I don't know what breathwork is. So there's some of this. Okay, so I have to admit, I am one to fucking love laughing at woo woo, but I don't not believe in God. So I like, you know, like there are, or like, you know, I understand that there are some practices that like we now learn have like a physiological benefit. We're understanding more about like, you know, certain forms of exercise and massage can like really help with healing trauma or even understanding trauma. And there are things like that. So I don't want to poo-poo the people who are partaking in these things necessarily, but I do remain skeptical of the people hosting it, what they're getting from it, if that kind of makes sense.
If you're attending this and it's just like, it's just a laugh, it's just some goofy shit I'm doing, you know, I'm playing, you know, we're reading oracle cards, I'm going to play a board game and I'm going to listen to someone like get the little thing and go around a bowl and it'll make a pretty noise, like, that's fine. But if you're seeking some sort of like transcendent, you know, rapturous experience, it's just like, you know, I sort of feel bad for someone who is like going for that. But if you're someone who is just like, yeah, this is some goofy shit, I get to look at some cool crystals,
and
do some,
yeah, exactly.
do some like free verse poetry, fucking whatever, and then tell someone about it, and they can't be like, lol, that sucks.
Yeah. Actually, that kind of sounds pretty sick. That sounds pretty funny. Like, as in, like, you could just say some wild shit and like be like, you can't judge. The Crystal Sound Bowl said that you cannot judge me for being a weird little freak. But and to be fair, the part that actually tickled me the most was the ceremonial grade organic cacao, parentheses vegan. I was just like, come on, mate, you're just gonna have some hot chocky. That's what you're gonna do. Like, don't pretend this is something different other than.
How's ceremonial? Like, is it
ceremonial grade?
Is it kava? Has it got like kava in it? Like,
actually,
am I gonna trip shit when I like have this?
I don't
hot
think so.
chocolate?
I don't think you're allowed to sell kava in Australia. Ceremonial.
Oh, okay, good call. Good
grade. So they wouldn't say, even if it was, to be fair. Australian ceremonial cacao. It should tell me everything I need to know about it.
Oh, okay, you Googling it.
Yeah, right now. Because, like, yeah, I don't know what that means.
Is it just like, is this just like the 5-star cacao? Like, is this just the best shit?
Ooh. So right now.
It's just like, is this going to be really good cacao? I haven't had a lot of cacao. I don't know. I have dark chocolate sometimes. I'm not a huge sweets guy.
We could do a double-blind study. Just have some, like, Cadbury hot chocolate powder and some ceremonial grey cacao and see how we go. Like, we might see the face of Hashem. We don't know. So, okay, here. Our mission is to help leaders, light workers / warriors healers, star seeds, world changers, and conscious mums and dads, a bit of the binary there, complete their missions from a full cup to charge and recenter you emotionally, vibrationally, and energetically so that you are ready for what you do next. Blah, 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 blah.
Everyone who intends this fucking thing is building an app and is going to tell you about what their fucking app does.
Yes, absolutely.
A lot of programmers living in Byron Bay. Like, it's something...
Oh, yeah.
Have you noticed as well, particularly in America and Burning Man, like, software developers, like, you know, programmers tend to be drawn to a lot of the spiritualism like flies on shit, but it's always like spiritualism where there's a chance that there's like drugs and hot chicks.
Drugs. Okay, so that does get me to something I will talk about in a second. The drugs.
And by hot chicks, I mean like sort of crusty chicks with dreadlocks.
Yeah.
Be topless at a beach.
Yeah. So there is a crustier side to Byron Bay that I will get to. A lot of what I would see in Byron Bay, which is trying to get a tourist buck, going and buying local crystals. You don't know that they're local. Buying quote-unquote indigenous artworks, which may not actually be by indigenous peoples. And, you know, all these
Looks
businesses
suspiciously like Western Desert dot art.
Yeah, and, like, not doing anything to work for the community. Like, purely sort of profit-driven, if that kind of makes sense. So,
I gotta go into that a little bit, because as someone who has driven a car in Byron Bay, the roads are dog shit. And
really?
With a town that's got like so much tourism money coming in, it's just like, and it's something that like, because, you know, I live with people who live in Byron Bay, you know, people who, you know, raise their families there, you know, spoken to their parents, they, you know, get quite mad about like tourists coming to town. And it only occurs to me now, it's just like, you probably as community members weren't seeing the benefits of all that money coming in. Like, why weren't you getting any tax money? Like, you know, why are there so many fucking potholes on the roads into Byron Bay? Why are there so many roundabouts? Like, why are the roads so, like, driving in Byron Bay is a fucking harrowing experience, because the roads, like, pedestrians are everywhere. It's all roundabouts. It's real life and death shit. So if you're living in Byron town, you're probably wondering, like, hey, this is, like, quite a wealthy shire. Why aren't we seeing any of this in like our fucking infrastructure? Why isn't any of this coming back to us, the people who live here?
And from my understanding, like Byron Shire covers like a bit of the inland as well, which is still where a lot, even more disadvantaged people, like poorer people live, and they would be seeing less of this shit again. There is that. Also, the infrastructure there, I've heard that parking in Byron Bay is like dog shit, so that's another reason. I get so stressed out about parking, so that's why I haven't been. But the other one is the herd immunity issue.
Okay, yeah.
So even before COVID, but especially during COVID. So before COVID, Byron Shire was known as having, I think possibly, I don't know if it was like on the East Coast or if it was like based on state averages, but it had like some of the worst vaccination rates for children. With COVID, it is still sitting at, I have the numbers here. So at the moment, in Byron Shire, which includes the town of Byron Bay, 86% of residents have received 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine compared to the statewide average of 94%. So
that's better than expected.
That's still better than I thought. That's better than I thought. But like that area having lower sort of vaccination rates is part of an ongoing trend and a pre-existing trend. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with access as well, which is very infuriating to me. For some people, it is for access, but there is a whole bunch of fucking wealthy people who could pay for any healthcare service they wanted to, who are choosing to not get vaccinated, who also profit from scaremongering, like fear-mongering. So like Pete Evans, for example, he is incredibly wealthy. Pete Evans was a Australian TV personality. I believe he was a chef. He has a whole bunch of books. I believe he might have a fucking podcast or whatever the fuck. But he is huge on the vaccine skepticism. I believe Lucy of Bunta Vista podcast fame did an episode on him. I haven't listened to it yet, but she did a whole episode on him on the QAnon Anonymous podcast.
Oh my goodness.
And
I haven't heard that. So I just remember...
No, I haven't either.
Remember Bunta Vista's one. To quote progenitor of this podcast, Bunta Vista, they quoted a medical journal or some sort of medical professional saying of his recipe book for children, which had a recipe for bone broth, which was extremely dangerous to children. And, like, do not feed this to your kids.
I have a section, bits and pieces, and there's a link to a tweet by Izzy Yoderberg, and it's a picture of a chalkboard in Byron Bay. It's supposed to read, I imagine it's supposed to read Anti-Omicron, but it says Anti-Omicorn, $8.90, and that lists just a bunch of veggies and fruits. There are people who are selling nearly $10 juices to people saying that they're gonna not get sick.
Would you like to hear an anecdote that my wife and I observed while we were staying in Byron that time?
Yeah, go ahead.
And so we were at this restaurant and it was like quite posh, and about 2 tables over we could kind of overhear a conversation between like a woman my age who, like, you know, was wearing very nice clothing and everything like that. We overheard a bit where they were talking about like, you know, their house looked a little bit Kmart, you know, like that level of like, you know, oh, where's your husband? Oh, he's off doing Epstein shit. Got it. And so
Yeah.
So I get the feeling that where some of this comes from is, you know, the husbands are like high-tech developers or working in extractive industries, you know, can afford to fucking live in Byron Bay. And some of these house mums, and this ties into some of the influences, are kind of left to their own devices. And if you're bored because your kids are at kindy, you have a chance to hop into these groups where they feed you horse shit about like, no, you don't need to get the shot. You just need to like eat healthy.
Yeah. And it probably feeds into this idea of like, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's connected to whether it's aesthetic or spirituality or this idea of, you know, there's definitely a streak of counterculture, like anti-establishment stuff there, which, you know, I'm the last person to fucking frown upon that. But when it is at the expense of public health, that's another thing. But I can see how people get sort of into these cliques. There were a few more things I wanted to discuss. It didn't really fit in to what I've talked about so far. There were 2 things I wanted to talk about. And first of all was I didn't realize that Byron Bay was a popular destination for schoolies. So for international listeners, schoolies is, I imagine it's like spring break. Typically it's for kids who have just finished grade 12.
End of school celebrations.
End of school celebrations. My dad was a toolie. I'm just going to leave that there. You can Google it if you want. So I have a lot to say about schoolies. Let's add it to the heap.
I got a skull fracture on my first night at schoolies. You can find stories about it. So we will definitely revisit that in the
Holy
heap.
shit. Was that in Byron Bay?
No, on the Gold Coast. But yeah, I have metal plates in my skull.
Fucking hell. Okay, all right, definitely add schoolies to the heap. I didn't finish high school, so no schoolies for me. But
you probably didn't miss much.
No, it was also a deliberate choice to never go anywhere fucking near it. So, friend of the show, Olivia, I'm going to read her retelling of her schoolies experience. And this shit looks so messy. And, okay, sorry, another thing. I'm so sorry. This is going to be so awful for you to, like, edit into something cohesive.
That's okay.
There's also a huge festival scene in Byron Bay. So Blues Fest and Splendor in the Grass are 2 huge, like, multi-day festivals that happen. People will go out there and usually it's a bit inland from Byron Bay and people get fucking plastered high off their kite and just watch live music, which sounds nice, but lots of deaths. Lots of overdose things, which I also have lots of thoughts on. And also, that also just remind me, bush doofs. So Byron Shire is the home of the bush doof, which is where usually young people go out and use drugs like ketamine, MDMA, and listen to EDM music and just have a great time. I've never been to one. I don't do drugs, so that's just not my thing.
I missed out back when I did drugs. I'm sad about it, but also kind of grateful because, yeah, like
it's just not my scene.
The bit where you're dancing to music sounds fun. The bit where you're like sleeping in a car sounds dog shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And these are areas that are not built for sustaining life, like people for too long comfortably. But I did see peer-reviewed papers that talked about bush doofs and identity, and they used the word neo-tribe a lot, and oh my fucking god, that just reminded me, if you Google Byron Bay, like, I guarantee you're going to come up with the words tribe,
I came
the
across
G
that as
word
well.
that means traveler, that we should not say, the GYPSY word. Fucking just, yeah, tribe is the main one. Just white ladies can't get enough of a tribe.
How much of that do you think is signaling relationship to an in-group? So you call something tribe, and that's why people know, and that's how people know that, you're someone who lives in Byron because you call things tribe. Like,
look, that is a funny idea. I do think that is something to think about. When I think of white women using the word tribe, I do think of Byron Bay. I never
really came across it. Like, I haven't heard tribe much, like, from the people I know who grew up there. So that could be telling. Like,
and as I'm about to get into, there's certainly other scenes there. Like, I think I've been focusing a lot on, like, white influences, and white influences fucking love the word tribe in Byron Bay. But there are certainly other demographics there. We'll get into the hardcore scene in a moment, but first I'll just read the schoolies' memories, because, like, Byron Bay looks so aesthetic on Instagram, but there's some shit happens in Byron. So, Olivia. I went to schoolies at Byron with my ex-girlfriend. Not ex when we booked it. Thanks, Olivia. I broke down crying at the last night, very drunk, after a cop on a horse made me tip out the remainder of my Smirnoff goon sack into a drain. Okay, fucking hell. Now I have to stop to elaborate on what a goon sack is. It's just wine. It's just cheap wine in a bag.
It is apparently a very good way to store wine.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good.
But also it is, sadly, a lot of the wine you get is, like, cheap, not very good, and is mostly used to get drunk when you're in university.
And hang it on a clothesline and, yeah, anyway.
The heap.
Yes, the heap. Cop made her throw out the remainder of her goon sack, and then the Red Frogs came and consoled us. And the Red Frogs, I believe, are they Salvos? They're some religious group, right?
They're definitely a religious group. I don't know if they're affiliated with the Salvos, but yeah, I remember my late father telling me to become a Red Frog at my own schoolies, and I was like, that sounds lame as shit. Because
you have to be sober. So, like, the Red Frogs, I think they come out and they just, like, help people who are having a bit of a rough time on various substances. So Olivia, so Red Frogs came and consoled us. Then I took an early morning flight, absolutely exorcist style, hosed down myself with vomit. And the plane made an unscheduled stop in Newcastle, which is a city a few hours south of Byron. I believe that unscheduled stop was because of me. You know what, Olivia? I think you're fucking right. I think you're right there. I think you vomited so much that they had to park the plane. They had to stop halfway home.
They had to, like, pump out the vomit. Everyone was, like,
yes,
floating around the cabin in your, like, exorcist spew.
Also that night, I met up with someone from my year at school. We booked the wrong week, so it was all Queenslanders. Oh my fucking God. And we hung out, and he was originally from Queensland and talked to some random about a drop kick from his old school. Then later that dude found us to come and fight us. I was like, okay, that's a lot. And then friend of the show, Larry, his little anecdote was, I smoked a bunch of the worst weed of my life, then had really mediocre sex with my vegan friend at a music festival in Byron. Does that count? And I was like, that is exactly, like, the quintessential Byron experience from my understanding.
You've nailed the Byron experience. I will add that to the itinerary.
Yeah. Oh, no. It's shit weed, mediocre sex. That's the Byron promise. And then so, last of all, that's just like that's the shirt of the show.
Oh, okay, merch, writing this down. Sorry.
Shit weed and mediocre sex. That's the Byron promise.
I don't have a pen. I have a sculpting tool. I'll carve it into the desk. Okay.
Your children. Father, what is this etching on our table? And then finally, I guess, like, the last bit that I couldn't really, like, fit in anywhere was on Twitter. I posted about talking about Byron Bay, and I admitted that I've never been. And someone who grew up there talked about how Australian fishing TV personality Rex Hunt was bashed up by a bunch of straight edge kids in Byron Bay. Which was a lot. It was a lot to take in. And I just like have been all week since reading it in my head, I've just been imagining him like doing like a fighting stance with his fists up saying yibbity yibbita, like as in like, but
giving them a big kiss.
Yeah, big kiss. But I think he got his ass handed to him. But that does bring me to the hardcore scene, which I only know. I've had Parkway Drive. I've been to their concerts a few times, but it sounds like you might have more knowledge in that area.
I just have a few more things to add. Sorry. So again, for our American Great Britain listeners, Rex Hunt hosted a fishing show. His whole thing was that he would give, like, he'd be like, oh, a little bit of like Steve Irwin, just like, oh, look at this little beauty. Look at it. Oh, he's so good. I love this fish. And then he'd like give them a kiss and then like release them sometimes. Like if it wasn't the right fish. That was kind of his stick.
Oh, if it wasn't the right size, he was like very passionate about like making sure, like measuring it and making sure you're not like illegally catching fish. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So good on him. But yeah, it was kind of a meme that this guy was like, you know, constantly like kissing these fish on the lips. Sometimes fish have teeth, so I can't imagine doing that. So yeah, I remember this story happening and it being a big deal because you have to understand as well that like Byron is, you know, a tourist town. There are lots of backpackers and stuff like that who go there. And there is stuff there that's pretty, but it is also like, as we said, you know, Chris Hemsworth lives there. Like a bunch of Australian TV personalities have homes there. It's kind of, if you're middle-aged and you want to go on a holiday, you can get a really nice holiday house that costs like $2,000 for a week. So that is probably how someone like that ended up there.
Yes. Because I believe he was with his son. I think his son was being, from what I read, allegedly a bit of a dickhead. Rex Hunt was standing up for his son and got his ass handed to him. And I think that they were alleging that these kids who beat Rex Hunt and his son up were pissheads and like were like drunk teenagers. And from my understanding, it came out that they were like, actually quite the opposite. We're like straight edge. Like we don't touch any of that shit. So some people might know Byron Bay, even just in passing. I don't know how big Parkway Drive is outside of Australia. I do know that friend of the show, Joe Kasabian, I spoke to him about this and he had seen Parkway Drive in America once.
They're a big deal.
They're a pretty big deal. They've done a few worldwide tours, which is weird because like I saw them at like Morayfield fucking community center for like $10 with Wish for Wings, I think, years and years ago. But yeah, so there's also, it doesn't surprise me that Byron Bay would produce Parkway Drive and a bunch of straight edge kids because it's kind of like the same sort of counterculture thing that we were kind of talking about before, where it's like there's this area, whether you're privileged or working class, like there's this, you're not really a city, you're a weird little town and people are living a little bit differently than elsewhere in the country.
I have an interesting thought about that because I could not help myself. I know you were sort of the main researcher for this episode. I could not help but like try to clarify some things in my head because hardcore, the people I knew from Byron Bay growing up grew up in kind of almost the nexus of Byron hardcore. So from like 2006, I know Parkway Drive emerged in the mid-aughties. So like they were all part of that scene. It was really like if you were a millennial in Byron Bay, a person who is now aged from like, you know, 30 to 40, you were enveloped in that scene. And I looked up hardcore punk as a genre and it emerged as a response to like hippie, you know, the hippie counterculture in the 60s and 70s. So it's kind of fascinating that Byron is known as this hippie town and it becomes like, you know, a hardcore capital. And I still see that a friend of mine is a member of like a group called like Hardcore Byron, which hasn't posted since 2016. So I think it's like, you know, it emerged and receded as, you know, musical genres do. So it wouldn't shock me if, you know, you're a kid in Byron, you grow up there and you just live there. And then you see all this shit about like, oh, we're like, you know, beautiful Earth Mother hippies, and you might feel alienated from that. So I wonder if that's possibly where that culture emerged from.
I'm actually very fascinated by that sort of parallel because it's like, I could see it as rejecting the whole hippie thing where it's like some drug use is fine, free love, blah, blah, blah. From memory, I'm coming at it from a totally different perspective and lens and time, but there was also this streak in hardcore music where they hated the idea of women being sluts as it was, like, you know what I mean? So, you know, there was like that song, was it by D's Nuts? Or it's like, just remember you can't make a hoe a housewife.
Oh my God.
Yeah, maybe that was just the dudes I was fucking hanging around, but like, there was definitely this idea that like, yeah, like promiscuity was not, like it wasn't conservative, but it was just like, and I'm not saying that was a direct rejection from like the hippie free love thing, but I just wonder like if that's where it came from. But
let's also remember that straight edge seems to exist in this weird place where it's not left and it's not right. It certainly looks like quite right wing in a number of aspects.
It has been in the past too. You
know, alt-right recruiters probably look at the straight edge crowd and are just like, fuck yeah, these guys are like prime recruitment material. But it kind of, I don't want to say apolitical, but yeah, like there are factions on the left and the right. They're not necessarily hardcore, but they are certainly like drawn to that scene. Mm-hmm. In preparation to recording this episode, I went back and listened to some hardcore.
Oh, hell yeah. What did you listen to?
Oh, mostly just Parkway Drive. I got to give it to Parkway Drive. I found the oldest music video of theirs I could find. It's from 11 years ago. And I can't remember the name of the song, but it's one where they're on a beach. And, you know, it starts off with them just like performing on a beach. And then as the video goes along, it's like one of them getting towed behind a boat, the guitarist. And then he starts like trying to surf and playing guitar at the same time.
Fuck yeah.
And then, like he's under the water, like the guy's trying to sing in the water. And the whole time, it's like the band members acknowledge how fucking silly this looks. Because like you can't really play the sick solo while you're surfing. And so they all have these like smiles on their faces, funny. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is fun.
It's like we're Beach Boys.
You have my respect.
Yeah, like we're like coastal boys, but also we're silly. That's kind of cool. I actually really like Parkway Drive. I haven't fucking like kept up with who they are as people or anything like that. Yeah, very very important and influential band in my early teen years.
I know metalcore kind of evolved out of hardcore. The other band I listened to was In Heart's Wake, who a friend of mine has actually filmed music videos for. And it sounds, this could just be me, but it sounds like anime music.
Oh no, really? A lot of my friends listen to In Heart's Wake. I don't think I ever listened to them. Are they from Byron?
Yeah. I remember a poster where like the lead singer is wearing the Deathly Hallows, so that's kind of the era this is coming from. And I don't know, I was just listening to it being like, oh yeah, fucking I can see it. Like, yeah, this is the start of an anime, and there's a twink with a sword.
Hey, that's kind of cool.
There's a really hot chick, and then there's like a really badass guy. So I'm talking about the anime, not the band.
Oh,
the anime I'm seeing in my mind.
Right. I see what you're saying. I was going to say, wow, this is a real dudes rock moment. Oh, it's just your brain. You just have a dudes rock brain.
No. So any animators out there want to make the In Heart's Wake anime.
In Park's Wake? Is that our tribute band to like Byron Bay, like hardcore and metalcore?
Yeah, I'll sing the melodic bits. You can do the like death growl bits.
I've tried a few sneaky ones in my time. I don't think it's going to be very good. Basically, to wrap it up, if you ever make it to Australia or the east coast of Australia, I do think that you should maybe go there. Maybe like, this is one of my favorite things to do when I'm going somewhere new, is I like to like have an internal bit or be a guy, be a particular guy. So like you could do a little David Attenborough thing. You could lean into the woo-woo. You could go to Byron and listen to every person who wants to sell you something or try and convince you to go into their cult earnestly. You could pretend you've lived there all your life. If you do any of those things, I'd like to hear your experience. And I'm thinking I might go down for like an overnighter and see, maybe I should go to a fucking sound bowl therapy thing. Like, I'm making fun of it on a podcast, but I don't know. Maybe it's life-changing. Maybe I'll have some ceremonial grey cacao. Maybe I will... oh, by the way, I also looked on Etsy. I typed in... I changed the filter so it would only show me listings from Byron Bay.
Oh, wow.
It was incredible. Oh my God. I would recommend everyone do it themselves. Lots of very expensive crowns made out of seashells.
Oh.
There were like lots of like witchy cows. There was DIY henna. Like lots of crystals. Some that were like, I don't know if plinths is the word, or obelisks.
Okay.
There's some like phallic looking boys, and they had lots of magical properties, apparently, and very expensive. Look, I like a crystal. I like looking at crystals. I think they look pretty. But people are charging a fuck ton of money and saying that they like are on your vibrational frequency or whatever the fuck. That's where it's weird. But anyway, yeah, I would recommend going to Etsy and changing your filter for store location Byron Bay and just having a little look-see. Also lots of spell and tarot card reading offerings as well. It's got everything, really. But yeah, to sum it up, just reading Byron Bay, it's interesting how still am very critical of the space, but it has made me think a lot about a lot of what people go there to search for is to be closer to nature, to find community, to, you know, get away from the city, all things that I think are very understandable. I think my ultimate distaste are people who are grifting, the wage disparity, the, you know, income resource disparity. Like there's a lot of poorer people there. There's people who aren't fucking multimillionaires, and there are also multimillionaires there, and I just think that that's pretty fucked that exists. And also that it has a really low percentage of the population who are Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples, despite being like the first place in Australia to have like a native land title granted that set like this precedent for the rest of Australia. So it was like this really important court case happened there, I believe, or a particular type of land grant happened, like was located in Byron Bay. But I believe only 1.4% of people who live in Byron Bay are Indigenous, despite that. And so like it's a very gentrified space. It's built like, you know, one of the most picturesque aspects. I can't stop thinking about the fact that this fucking lighthouse was built on ceremonial grounds. This, you know, like, and it's like, obviously that happens everywhere on the colony, but it's sort of just like added insult to injury finding that out and knowing that all this wealth is in that town and it's not going to you know, the traditional custodians of the land. So anyway, that's my little rant is TLDR, not a fan of colonization or capitalism. Sorry if this offends.
This will be a thesis of the podcast, so don't worry.
Yeah, yeah.
But also, like, a lot of those Indigenous people who live there absolutely do not live in a huge mansion with an infinity pool where you can take cool photos of you and your wife who was in that... What was that show with the mermaids?
Ooh.
Not H2O, just that one. The one that was on like Netflix, the horny one.
Oh no, I never watched that. I think I heard
Chris
whispers of
Hemsworth's
it.
wife was in it.
No, really?
Yeah. Oh god, what was it called again? It was sort of good, but like it was also very silly. I was like, man, fuck yeah, make more of these shows.
Oh, I like silly.
Hi everyone, the show I'm ranting about is called Tidelands from 2018.
Yeah, okay. Kept away from that. But yeah, like, yeah, the 1.4% of Indigenous peoples there, I don't hazard a guess that they're probably not living on these cliff mansions next door neighbours to Chris Hemsworth, but also I could be wrong.
They probably don't even have the Kmart, you know, home decoration that this lady was like kind of making fun of when I was at dinner.
Fuck me dead. No flax linen in fucking mustard natural dyes. I say as I'm sitting on sheets that are fucking flax linen and...
I say as I sit on my gaming chair, which is made of beautiful flax linen.
Really?
No,
I was going to say, that sounds rank.
Made of...
I was going to say, damn, that'd be stinky.
But no.
Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, okay. I have a little travel itinerary for Byron Bay.
Please.
The main Byron town suck shit is the key thesis. Byron Bay is connected to a lot of like very cool stuff. You'll probably end up staying in a town like Bangalore because staying in the town itself, unless you're staying at a backpacker's, you know, costs a fucking packet. But Bangalore is nice. The beaches are really nice. I have had some very nice times there. If you go to Byron Bay, do not stay for longer than 3 days because you'll get really fucking bored and depressed. don't do like a week and a bit vacation like me and my wife did
Oof,
in 2019.
that is too long.
No, like we still had fun, but I guess the key things, you're going there for about 3 days. Go snorkeling or scuba diving. That was the key reason we went to Byron Bay, is that I learned how to scuba dive there at Julian Rocks. It's amazing.
Oh, sorry. Julian Rocks is where, like, basically I don't know if God is, the correct term, but, a creator spirit for the Arakwal people, is said to live in Julian Rocks. Sorry.
One of my greatest, like, closest moments to, like, being spiritual that I consider was seeing a grey nurse shark that was asleep and was just, like, hovering there. Like,
oh my God.
This was, like, the final day of my scuba diving test, and my instructor, all the other students had, like, dropped out just for, like, lots of different reasons. Like, some people just didn't show up. So I basically had, like, a one-on-one private diving class. It kicked ass. And the water clarity was, like, dog shit. It was, like, 5 meters. And at one point, my instructor just pointed out, like, 5 meters away, there's a grey nurse shark just, like, hovering in the one spot. And that's what they do when they sleep. And so I just, like, rested on my knees, like, 20 meters under the water and just watched the shark hang out.
That is so cute.
It was really nice. Then at one point later on, we had, like, about 5 of them around us. And I was just like, oh, even though grey nurse sharks are fine, they won't hurt you, like, as long as you're not a fuckhead.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was cool as shit. They just came and checked us out. Go snorkeling at Julian Rocks. That kicks ass. There are some nice restaurants in the town. The main beach is nice. Go have fish and chips there. Go see there's some big waterfalls nearby. That kicks ass.
Yeah. The nature there, I mean, even inland, does seem really incredible.
I was going to say go check out the lighthouse, but knowing what I know now, I feel kind of guilty for having, like, been to the lighthouse. Go watch a bunch of fuckheads, like, fly drones at the lighthouse.
Mate, we probably live on sacred sites. Like...
Yeah, good point, actually, yeah. And look, the lighthouse, it is very pretty. It is the easternmost point. It is worth checking out. The parking is dog shit, so, brace yourself for that.
So that is true. That is... Okay. So I have avoided Byron for that reason. Good to know that is still the case.
Oh, I meant mainly at the lighthouse.
Oh, at the lighthouse. Okay.
In the town, if you go in the off season, it's a bit better. But yeah, like, God help you if you're going there.
Right.
Like, Blues Fest or Splendor in the Grass or something like that. I went to Splendor in the Grass in 2007. It's the only real music festival multi-day music festival I've really been to. Look, I had fun. I saw a bunch of acts that probably don't exist anymore. I saw Muscles. I saw The
hell
Editors.
yeah.
I saw Powderfinger.
Nice. Some classics.
It was so dusty that, like, my shower at the end of the day, I was, like, literally spitting up, like, gobs of, like, mucus with dust in it. So enjoy that. That was the one time it didn't rain. So the rest of the time it's just muddy as shit. Yeah, it's fascinating that Byron is this hub, but when you go there, it feels kind of like there's nice beaches, but it feels like there's really not that much there. You can get a photo taken of your aura. You can buy a crystal that costs like $100, but was like $2 wholesale.
Right.
That's the trick with buying crystals.
Yeah, exactly. I did see, side note, someone on Facebook Marketplace was selling, like, I think it was like $2,000 worth of crystals, and, like, what they said you could get retail for was just, like, atrocious. I was like, I can't believe that. That's fucking criminal. But I just Googled, if you're in the area, 90 minutes south of Byron Bay is Lennox Head. That's where I have been. And I went there with someone I was seeing a few years ago, and it was quieter than Byron Bay. It's cheaper. We stayed at an Airbnb. So basically you have the surf beach there, and then one street back there's this giant tea tree lake. So it's like this big lake that I say big, but big lakes in Australia I think are still pretty small. This lake that because it's surrounded by trees.
I think I've been here, actually.
You have?
So
yeah. So the water,
ass.
the tannins from the tea trees are like make the water brown.
Into Coke.
Yeah, it looks like Coke, and it looks funky, but my girlfriend and I went in at the time, and We had a little swim, and then something touched our foot, and we squealed and went back onto to the shore.
That's the lake experience.
Yes,
though.
exactly. But when we were in the water, like, I don't know if it was like a placebo effect or whatever, but like it felt so soothing on my skin. And also, we had been bitten by mozzies the night before. Yeah, like we weren't scratching at our skin or anything like that. It was like a really soothing, yeah, it was really good for your skin. And I believe tea tree is known to be good for your skin. So I'd recommend going there. It was a lovely time, and it's a lot quieter if you want a Byron adjacent experience. This podcast has been sponsored by Byron Shire. No, it hasn't. It hasn't. I fucking wish.
Don't get vaccinated.
Please do not get vaccinated. No. I think Byron Shire are trying to do the opposite of that. There were a lot of outreach, like nursing and midwifery and health, like allied health events that they were trying to promote in Byron Bay and surrounds, and it's like, fuck. Like, I mean, that's good to have in general, but I'm like, I wonder if there's a concerted effort for some people.
Yeah, because probably some of these areas are like ticking time bombs of herd immunity.
Oh, fuck yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so I'm sorry that was like a bit windy. I got a bit ranty, but it's interesting to hear how Byron was obviously had, 22,000 years of people living there, and then it turned quickly into like this smelly working class area to a bit of a touristy area, but for like poor bees. Now has this ever evolving
influencer class
and alternative medicine and wellness tourism as well.
And we can get into, like, probably later on in the podcast. I remember reading an article years ago about how there seems to be this cycle of an area is kind of like poor, and then people with like cultural cachet, musicians, artists and stuff like that, people who are usually outcasts, move there, make the area kind of exciting, and then it immediately gets gentrified.
Yeah.
I don't remember the article, because the tone of the article seemed to be like, hey, if you want to like gentrify your area, you just get some artists in.
But also a very specific type of art.
No, fuck off.
Because I don't imagine they'd be saying that about, let's say, rap and hip hop.
Yeah.
But like, no, I think it's like if you build up, build up an artistic community. Artists are probably poorer than others, so they might also flock there, and then you have this like great community, and it's perfect for the rich to move into. Oh yeah,
that's the other thing. The art has to be like attractive to like white middle class people, so it has to be like a Xavier Rudd, John Butler kind of fucking aesthetic.
Oh, I can think of. Oh, shit. There was this band called, I think they're called Custom Kings. There was this band that I thought were from Byron Bay, but they're just from Melbourne. But, there's a sound that I associate with Byron Bay, for sure.
Did they move to Byron to record? Because
Possibly.
That's the thing. There was like a big recording studio there, and it's a thing. It's like, oh, let's go to Byron to record. I think a lot of musicians do move there because of the association with like popular music and music festivals and stuff like that. So I know
that makes sense.
I know like Tex Perkins lives there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to see people who live in Byron Bay. Matt Damon and Zac Efron both own property in Byron Bay.
Yeah.
What?
Yep.
I mean, I knew Chris Hemsworth, but I didn't realize they did. Tony Childs, Olivia Newton-John, Jack Johnson. Oh, Jack Johnson. That makes sense. If there's a gentrified beach, Jack Johnson owns property there.
Yep. That's
an allegation, not a fact. Don't quote me. Probably I'll try and de-identify this information, but I was speaking to someone last week who spent some time around Byron Bay on like an animal sanctuary, and perhaps or perhaps not, allegedly in Roblox in Minecraft, Chris Hemsworth and his wife got a pet pig.
What?
And quickly realized that they couldn't handle the pet pig, and then surrendered it to the sanctuary, which is, as far as like things go, that surrendering it is good. But also they have all the resources in the world to like have a dedicated fucking pig carer. So Yeah, pig handler. And also would be promoting local jobs if they got a dedicated pig handler. Anyway, that's an allegation, if I'm remembering correctly, from last week. Again, don't quote me on that, but I just thought that was funny. Thor is no match for the humble pig.
A pig that they probably thought was like a miniature pig
Yes.
or whatever it is, but turned out to just be a regular ass pig, because that seems to be the problem that happens.
People buy piglets or malnourished pigs, and then they start feeding it, and they're like, oh no.
Oh, this is just an actual pig.
So yeah, that's all I have on Byron Bay. Like, this was just a flyover. So as I said, this is just like a little flyover. I'm sure there are people listening to this who grew up in Byron Bay, and we've probably got some things wrong. And to you, I say, go make your own podcast about it then.
And look, we'll probably be returning to the topic of like coastal towns.
Oh, God.
And we'll probably have to, just because of like media. We didn't really get into surfy culture.
No.
The person I dated who lived in Byron, I think liked me because I was not like a surfy guy, because like surf culture has, I love the ocean. I'm just dog shit surfer. Yeah, surfy culture is something we will tackle. I'm adding that to the heap. We have to discuss Puberty Blues at some point, either the series or the movie.
Oh my God.
But yeah, we will definitely be returning to like small coastal towns, because so much Australian media and art is set there. It is such a place that is like idolized within Australian culture. It's a real aspirational thing. But I think if you spend too long there, particularly in a really touristy town like Byron, you just find they're just ultimately very boring.
Lucas, I have an idea for a novel. What if an Australian coastal town where everyone is a surfer and carefree?
Don't you fucking Tim Winton me.
It also holds a deep, dark secret that no one talks about.
Was this a tweet the other day? Are you quoting a tweet at me?
No, but that also makes sense. I've written about it before. I'm like, because, you know, I grew up in a coastal town, not a touristy one. It's called Deception Bay. People make fun of it because it contains mangroves, which are the armpits of the sea. They're very important.
Mangroves are nice. I like mangroves.
They have their
come
place.
around on mangroves.
I like mangroves. Lots of crabs nearby. Anyway, I live in a dodgy coastal town with lots of secrets and not so much secrets. And I grew up in a pretty fucking depressing situation. So it's kind of like, I don't want to read any Australian books because that isn't novel to me. The idea of there being a small town with a depressing undercurrent. I'm like, yep, cool. Okay. Yep. Like at least some Tim Winton books had like a magical, I think it was I can't remember, Cloud Street or whatever the fuck it was. It was like a magic undertone to it. But if I read that correctly, I'm so bad at books.
We may have to get a guest on to do Tim Winton, because I read the Lockie Leonard books as a kid and that was about it. There's a big like cultural blind spot for Tim Winton's work.
I just don't care for him very much. I read Cloud Street because the previous band that I mentioned, Custom Kings, had a song called Rose Pickles, and I'm like, what the fuck is Rose Pickles? And it was a reference to Cloud Street by Tim Winton. And so I read the book and I didn't like it. Because again, I was just like, this is just relatable. I don't fucking... Okay. Yeah, it was fun researching this, but it feels very odd to like not come down hard and fast on like my hill to die on. All I know is that I will not be dying on the hill where the lighthouse is in Byron Bay, because that feels very disrespectful. But anyway, thank you for having me. I hope you gain some useful knowledge. In fact, I know that you did by knowing that it is a bite and not a bay. And yeah, listeners, please shoot us any feedback, messages, compliments only. I have rejection sensitive dysphoria, so I will cry if you're mean to me. We also have...
Yes, me also.
Yes, me also. We have a Discord server now, which we can share the link to, I'm sure.
Oh, I'll do housekeeping stuff, don't worry.
Sick. Awesome.
I think since we are a podcast about Australian Gothic and the deep horror lurking behind Australian culture, I don't think we can go further without discussing the Australian film Wake and Fright. We're doing a movie episode. So please join us for that.
Ooh, I've never seen it or heard of it before.
It does feature a very intense scene involving kangaroo hunting, so just big
Oh,
content
that's
warning
alright.
for that.
Yummy. I like kangaroos.
Okay, good. It is a very visceral scene, though. But yeah, that'll be our next episode, so thank you for joining us for episode 2.
Okay, bye.
Hi everyone, thanks again for listening to another episode of Australian Gothic. Just some notes, our next episode on the film Wake and Fright will be out in 2 weeks' time. Please go and watch it or read the book in the meantime. If you like the show and want to find more of us, you can find us on SoundCloud at Australian Gothic. We're also now on iTunes and Spotify under Australian Gothic. You can find us on Twitter at OzGothicPod for all the latest episodes and news. Josie is on Twitter as at JSSPCR1. We also have a Discord now. Link to that in the show notes. Thanks again for everyone who's listened. Your feedback means the world to us. We will see you soon. Love you.